When it comes to sentencing, there are various types of probation that a defendant can be put on if they're found guilty or they resolve their case by way of a plea. There's administrative probation, which is the most lenient. And then there are types of probation like house arrest, community control is another word for it, that are very stringent. Now, when it comes to drug offender probation, we are definitely talking about one of the more strict forms of probation that somebody could be put on. And something that the offender really has to consider before opting for drug offender probation, if it's available to them, is whether or not they truly do want to participate in recovery, in treatment, and trying to overcome their drug addiction as a whole. And that's really the key here, because while we say that drug offender probation is the most stringent form of probation, or one of the most stringent forms of probation, we're also talking about an avenue which may be the defendant's only opportunity to avoid a prison sentence. Maybe their only opportunity to finally get serious and take fighting addiction seriously and have the tools and the looming threat of incarceration over them to help push them along and fight in beating this dependency by participating in the special conditions of DOP. Now, this is an area of supervision where we see, on occasion, deferred sentencing, which is allowed by statute, where a defendant comes in and would otherwise receive an incarceration sentence, but instead is being given the opportunity to participate in drug offender probation, abide by the terms, go to treatment, complete all of those conditions, and be monitored by case managers and counselors, come back in, and if they've done well, instead of being sentenced to prison, they're sentenced to a further amount of probation, whereby they can complete any step-down or follow-up treatment, because remember, they've already completed some level of drug offender probation in order to prove themselves. Now, when sentencing is deferred, that's where a defendant comes in, pleads either no contest or guilty to the charge, with the sentence being some years in prison or some months in the county. However, once given the opportunity to complete some level of drug offender probation, the judge will retroactively go back and delete the incarceration part of the sentence. This is something that I really caution defendants about. Now, of course, I think getting help for drug addiction, alcohol addiction, going to treatment, beating that addiction, of course, that's a great thing. However, I don't think it's a great thing when you take probation or supervision and give the offender so many chances to mess up, especially when you're talking about something as difficult as beating drug or alcohol addiction. Okay, so with that being said, if given the opportunity to take straight probation as opposed to drug offender probation, always take straight probation and go and get the help and take it seriously and do it on your own. Now, you're not usually given the option right there on a silver plate, so it's something you have to argue for, so that's something you want to talk to your attorney about, because drug offender probation requires that the defendant be absolutely amenable to drug and alcohol treatment. In fact, they're going to be evaluated to determine if they're amenable or a good candidate. Okay, they've got to have the time to devote to recovery, because these are going to be conditions that are made a part of your probation. And you can be violated if you don't go to those AA meetings, if you don't go to the recovery house when you're supposed to, abide to curfews, if you don't go to treatment and counseling by a licensed psychologist. Okay, this is a significantly greater level of supervision, and anything that you do that does not conform will wind up landing you in front of the judge again on a new charge, which is called a violation of probation. So when you're talking about your liberty, always opt for or fight for the least restrictive means of probation. And in no way am I saying that drug and alcohol treatment is not smart, it's not good. It's just, your liberty should not be contingent on those things if you can help it. Because remember, on straight probation, you're going to report to your felony probation officer or misdemeanor probation officer once a month. It's going to be scheduled, and rarely is that going to be deviated from. On occasion, that probation officer may ask you to submit to random drug and alcohol testing, especially if they see something that they think is suspicious. If you come in lethargic, sleepy, look impaired, they're going to drug test you. Otherwise, you report once a month, and then once your term is over, that's it. However, a day in the life of a drug offender probationer could be something to the effect that you get up in the morning and you report to work, because having employment would be a condition of drug offender probation, or is it's more so something that's enforced than on straight probation. Once you get out of work, you check in with the probation officer. In some circumstances, you have to verify that you've been at work, and then you go to your drug and alcohol treatment class, which may be scheduled around 4 times a week. So then from 6 to 9, 10 o'clock at night, you're going to be in drug and alcohol treatment class, and then you're going to be reporting possibly to a recovery house where there's a curfew in effect. Okay? All of this, obviously more stringent, more opportunities to violate, more opportunities to wind up in prison with a new charge of a violation of probation. Now, finally, one thing that I get asked about constantly when it comes to drug offender probation, as opposed to straight probation, is the manner in which drug testing is conducted, the random drug testing. Basically, you are subject to testing at any given moment when you're talking about drug offender probation. You've got random testing when you go into your scheduled probation officer visits. They can conduct a urinalysis there. If you test positive on the strip, they send it out for confirmation and primarily to try and convict you with the courts by having a laboratory conducted test with that same urine sample. While on drug offender probation, you can be contacted in a number of ways by probation and directed to go to any approved testing facility near the location that you are at the time to submit to random testing. That test, the results of which will be sent to your probation officer and either used to confirm that you're not using or submitted to the court as a violation of probation through an allegation in a warrant. Also, if part of your drug offender probation requires you to reside in a recovery house, that recovery house operator or counselor may subject you to random testing at any minute while you're there. Also, alcohol testing may be a part of your very being if you are on drug offender probation. That being said, I mean the Scran monitor. The Scran monitor is a device that you wear that will constantly be monitoring your sweat for the presence of alcohol. If it does test for the presence of alcohol, that could be the basis of a violation. A warrant submitted to the judge for signing, and then you taken into custody and have to answer to additional charges for violation of drug offender probation. So with that being said, always fight for straight probation as opposed to drug offender probation. Not that drug treatment and recovery is not a great thing. It is. It's a great thing. However, we're talking about your liberty. We're talking about being subject to the Department of Corrections and a court that has jurisdiction that can sentence you to the maximum term of the underlying offense for which you were originally placed on probation in the first place. So you want to make it as lenient as possible, and certainly not more stringent.